Okay, so we've had an experience of making an Android app that has a simple, very simple user interface, and it has multiple activities and an intent. And I understand that you're only partly understanding what all of these things are and how they fit, but I also want to start talking about looking ahead, thinking ahead, so designing an app. And presumably the reason that everyone is interested in studying this is because they have some idea of something that they're going to build that's going to make them a lot of money, or get them a job or something like that. So I want to design an app. So everyone has an idea for an app. Everyone. As soon as it became known that I'm learning to program in Android, people that I hardly know are approaching me that they have the best idea ever, and I'm going to do the work and implement their app for them. And, well, okay, do some of the work yourself and implement your own app. So there are so many ideas for an app. We most of them are not very good. So think about why your app would be better on a mobile device, on an Android phone or an Android tablet, than it would be on a simple web page. And there's some very obvious reasons. If you use locators, or if you need to be in a specific place when you're running the app and you don't want to carry a laptop around in your pocket. So those reasons why it makes sense that an application would be on a mobile device. Some of them aren't, and they're not going to be able to compete with an application that's implemented on a web page. So, for the purpose of this course, at least some of the upcoming lessons, we're going to work on my app. And it's designed to be simple, but it's something that I want to have. And the reason for building this app is because it's not too complex, but there are several aspects of Android development that we can learn in the context of this app. So it's nominally useful. So here's the need. Every week when I come home from my bowling games, I can't remember what my scores were. And I don't have any history of my bowling scores, so I can't look back in time and say I did really well that week. And I want a personal record of my bowling scores, so that I can collect them at the bowling alley. So while I'm there and my score is on the screen or written on a piece of paper, I want to put it into the database that I'm carrying around. And I want it to do some other things, some statistical things, like calculate the total pinfall for the night. And I want to save that in the database and maybe have a graph. I'm not really sure that a graph would be useful because my bowling score just doesn't change over time. I wish it did. It has not improved by more than a couple of % over the last 20 years. That's discouraging, isn't it, when I think about it that way, but I keep trying. Okay, so maybe we'll add some other things along the way if it seems like that would be a useful way to demonstrate how to do something in Android. So when I think about the activities, how do you want the application to look when it launches? And I can think of two activities. So the main activity I want to be most accessible when I launch the application. So the first thing that comes up when I launch the application is I want the option of being able to enter my 3 games for this night, and this activity should allow me to go directly to the other activity where I can see the history of my scores. So maybe I launched the application because I just want to look at my scores and show them to my friends and gloat over how well I did, or I want to open the activity at the bowling alley and enter my 3 scores. So one of those two things, but I've kind of decided that the main one should be, the reason that I would open this application is to enter those 3 scores for my bowling night. And so that's a whole lot of things that I don't know how to do yet. Well, I know how to do them. You don't know how to do them. So we don't know how to design the view. We had a view in the easy application that we built in the last video, a previous video where we had a single button and we just allowed it to fall on the screen wherever it was and be as big as it needed to be. And we don't know how to design a database or create the database and add the data to it. And we don't really have any way of designing an app so that we can pass data around in it. So the software architecture aspects of an application. How do you manage the data in the application? How do you organize the code in the application? We have almost no code so far. We're just getting to the concepts of activities and views and so on. And once we get to having a bunch of code kicking around, we need it to be kicking around in the right place so that we can find it and we can work with it appropriately. So the other, down at the bottom of this slide, the other activity is to display the score history. So design a view to display the history of the scores, and that means we have to retrieve the data from the database and again manage the data in the application. That's kind of something that we may have already done up here. I'm not sure exactly how this will unfold as we go along. And perhaps we're going to offer other views of the data. So this is the one where I'm not sure it makes sense either in the context of the app or for learning purposes to draw a graph of the history. So present the data using different views, the same data. We might also want to be able to remove historical data. So if there's ways to add data, there should be a way to remove data, or the database will become infinitely large if it goes on forever. So perhaps if I've been bowling and I'm not interested in how well I did 3 years ago, maybe we need a way of taking stuff out of the database as well. Okay, so I start on a piece of paper. I never start drawing, even in PowerPoint. But you do want to have, before you start coding or working in a GUI builder, you want to have the concept of what's going to go on in your user interface, because you're going to change this a lot of times. You don't want to be changing it by changing code. That you will get really tired of that. So start drawing sketches with a pencil and have an eraser handy, because you're not going to probably come up with a good one the first time. So keep in mind that when you're designing applications for a very tiny screen, that people have, well, I have very fat fingers, and it's hard for me to click on some of these very, very small things that are, they want me to select something that's 1/4 of an inch across when my finger is 1/2 of an inch across. Maybe not quite that big, but you know what I mean. So don't be stingy with screen real estate. If you're going to want someone to put their finger on a text box, for example, make it big enough so that they will actually hit that text box, and then you'll have a nicer relationship with your user. So here's my main activity to enter the scores. So when this application launches, I want my bowling scores to be associated with the date that I bowled that score, those scores. And in bowling, if you don't go bowling, you have 3 games, and the total of those 3 games is an interesting number. Maybe the average of those 3 games is an interesting number, but probably not. Just because you can calculate something doesn't mean it has to be in the user interface. If it's not going to be interesting, this is really what I want to remember. I want to remember how I did in the 3 games and what my total was. And some buttons. If I start to enter data and I change my mind, maybe I want to cancel it. That one is not looking as easy as the other ones. The save button means that I have entered the 3 games and I want to persist that data into the database. And show history is the button that will take us to the other activity. So we'll have an intent that will start the other activity and display the user interface for looking at the historical bowling scores. So, as you might be guessing by now, I have very little, if any, graphical skills, and these colors are kind of nauseating already, aren't they? So we'll probably try and do a little bit better. If you know anybody, or if you have some graphic skills, you might enlist some help for how to put colors together and so on. Android devices have a menu button. It's either a hard button, meaning that it's physically a button you can push, or it's a soft button, meaning somewhere on the screen there's a place to hit the menu button. And you can take advantage of that when your activity is in focus. If this is what's on the screen and it's in focus, then you can decide what's behind that menu button. And I'm not really sure we have anything interesting to put in there right now, but for purposes of demonstration, I suppose we might put something in there. I'm not sure what. So here's my other activity and the things that I'm thinking about. This is the view the history of the bowling scores. So here are the dates, presumably in chronological order, and the 3 games that I bowled on those dates, and the series total. Now I've got an inconsistency in my 2 activities already. I called this one series, and I think I called the previous one total. See, I should have done it on a piece of paper. And the average. Now what is the average? That's my average, the running average of all of the games historically. So maybe I should have filled in some example numbers here. If I bowled 200, 200, 200, and my series is 600, then the average is going to be 200. And then in the next week, we would take into account all 6 games, and the running average would be the average of those 6 games. And then in the 3rd week, the average would be the average of all 9 games. So this is my running average, which allows me to see if I'm improving or I'm doing not as well as I had been in the past. So here are some things that I'm thinking about. When I started designing this, it seems like maybe I need more space going across, and I kept making this box a little bigger, as if I could make the screen on my phone bigger, which of course I can't. So maybe I would eventually want to choose to do this in landscape, and maybe that would mean that the whole application should be done in landscape. And when you're working in this application, you hold your phone horizontally instead of vertically in portrait. And some things that I'm thinking about. Would a graph be of any value? So I already told you that, admitted that my bowling average has not changed in 20 years, probably 30 years. So this graph would be maybe a flat line, or maybe if I only keep 1 year's worth of data in here, maybe a graph would be interesting, and I could see what I was doing over this past year. I don't know. If it feels interesting for us to have a video about drawing graphics, then maybe we'll do a view that has a graph in it. So this is a scrolling window, and a scroll bar will be here so that we can look back, and hopefully we'll be able to figure out how to use the finger scrolling for this, which is something that the Android device really does a good job of. So here's my thinking about this, designing the application. I don't have a complete design. I have kind of a design with kind of some ideas. So I know what my need is, and I'm going to jump into it without jumping in knowing everything that it's going to do. If we spend too much time here, we won't get to the good stuff. And probably this application is not the application that's going to make us any revenue. This is the application that's going to teach us what not to do. Is that too pessimistic? Maybe. Okay, so here's what I'm trying to say in this one. Design your application on paper. Even in PowerPoint, it was a waste of time. If I was really designing this for my own use, I wouldn't have done it in PowerPoint. I would have done it on some paper. And visualize how it's going to be used. So really draw a picture and pretend that you're clicking on buttons with your pencil, and you're going to change your user interface lots and lots and lots of times. And if you have paper, you can just bunch it up and draw another one. And if you have code, then it's going to take you hours to do each change, which isn't how you want to be spending your time. So your application that you're thinking about, if it's something that you want or need, or someone in your immediate circle, your friends and family have, you have a better chance of making something that's valuable. So what you want to do is probably what somebody else wants to do. And this is to encourage and discourage. There should be lots and lots of bad ideas before you come to a good one. So have lots of ideas and move through them quickly to get to the good one. Thomas Edison said something like, I haven't failed, I've come up with 10,000 ways that don't work. And I'm sure that I've butchered that quote, but don't worry about throwing stuff away and coming up with another one and starting again. So the upcoming videos are going to introduce new topics, and we will use this bowling scores example to get us to the next level of development. And we will probably introduce new topics with very small apps that just study one very small issue, and then go and add those to the bowling score application. So like GUI and event handling is a fairly big issue, and talking to a database using SQLite is a big issue, and the organizing the application in a modular way so that you can actually work with what you create is really very important. So it doesn't matter what you're creating, what your app does. We really need a good way of organizing the software architecture of your application so that it's fun for you to be working with it instead of creating a Frankenstein monster. Okay, we'll go and do some real stuff in the next video.